my sexy simmerers. This is Carla, and I am here today to introduce a soup marathon. I am actually making soup, and I want to tell you about the 5 soups that we've pulled together for you. We've got black bean soup with topper Whoppers, fresh tomato soup with garlic chips, a personal favorite, sausage, beans, and green soup, another personal favorite, aromatic chicken soup with ginger, so good if you have a cold, and split pea soup with sizzled spices. All of these are totally cozy, warming, easy, makes a big pot of soup. There's nothing better. I love making soup, I love eating soup, and I hope you do too. So go get your Dutch oven out. Time for soups. Hey Split Peoples, it's Carla. I'm here again in my kitchen for another episode of That Sounds So Good. When I start developing a new recipe, I am asking myself 3 questions. 1, is the dish delicious? 2, am I writing the recipe in a way that you can make it and have fabulous results at home? And 3, is it beautiful to photograph? And in today's recipe, I nail 2 out of 3. And that third one, let's just say, beauty is in the eye of the pea holder. Today, I'm going to make split pea soup with mustard chili sizzle. This is a nostalgic recipe. This is a tasty recipe. It's khaki green. I'm not gonna lie about it, and I'm not gonna hide behind it. It's khaki green, and we're leaning into it. It's delicious. So delicious. It's so easy to make, and it's really delicious. I think it's beautiful too. My split pea soup starts the way all of my soups start, which is with the foundation of vegetables for a sofrito. They're humble vegetables, but when you do the right thing to them, they make things extra super duper delicious. You could chop this by hand, of course. I'm just gonna roughly chop and get everything into the food processor just to give it a head start. Because there's not a huge volume of vegetable for this sofrito, I don't need to separate them out and do them in their own batch in the food processor. They can just all go in there together and break down together. Onion. Why I said it like that? So the reason this recipe is in my book is because split pea soup was a soup I grew up eating. My mom, I'm realizing as an adult, she made a lot of soups, and like her soups were good. She made delicious soups. We had pasta fagioli like all the time. We had white bean and escarole soup all the time. She made black bean soup. She's just a super mom. And split pea soup, I have very distinct memories of eating them at home. I also had kind of a transporting split pea soup experience a number of years ago at a restaurant called Roberta's in Bushwick that I ordered for lunch one day, and it was just like the most humble thing in a bowl, but it was absolutely extraordinarily delicious. Whenever I think about split pea soup, I think about my mom, and I think about that lunch at Roberta's. All right, so I'm blitzing these to be pretty finely chopped, but not puree. You got to check for carrots. Carrots have a tendency to want to stay in like a giant hunk when everything else breaks down. So getting the sofrito ready is the first step in the recipe, and cooking the sofrito right is the first part of the process too. Okay, so this texture looks good. You can see that there's different vegetables in there, but I'm not looking for a ton of texture from the veg. In fact, one of the reasons why I love split pea soup is that it kind of purees itself while it cooks. Just everything really breaks down. Time to cook the sofrito. If you have made my pasta fagioli, you will have made my sofrito, and it starts with the magical pour of olive oil. All good things start with the magical pour of olive oil. Speaking of which, if you like olive oil, like and subscribe to the channel and ring the olive oil bell and get the notifications and never miss a video where I pour olive oil. Because that's what I do in every video. All right, I have my beautiful chopped veggies. And I don't know if I've showed this in a while, but if you just dump from the food processor, the blade will fall out but there's a little hole in the bottom. I don't want to tell you what it reminds me of, but it just reminds me of a little hole in the bottom. And you can just kind of pull that down from the other side and dump your veg in without dumping the blade. Oh, remember how I said there was going to be a rogue carrot? There it is. Every time. I'm keeping him in. It looks like a lot of olive oil to begin with, and this pot is going to look like very juicy at the beginning, and it's going to look very bright. I definitely like to salt at the very beginning of the cooking process so that all of this flavor is embedded in the vegetable from the very beginning and just becomes one. I will tell you that a lot of people over time have told me that every time they make soup, it's bland, it's watery, it doesn't have body, it doesn't taste that great, it's boring to eat. And the reason is this step is probably not happening. I believe so firmly in the power, the magical power of the sofrito, and it is why soup tastes good. If your soup tastes good, it's because your sofrito was good. If your soup tastes bad, it's because you just did not get down with the sofrito. You got to get down with your sofrito. And that process takes time to coax out all of the flavor, time to cook off all of this liquid, and that's great because what do we have in the darkest days of the winter and the March? We have time. You know, it hasn't sprung forward or whatever. It could be snowing. I'm going to cover the pot at the beginning. These little dimples on the underside of the Dutch oven are there for a purpose. It's designed to capture and trap steam. It will drop down everywhere, basting the sofrito with its own liquid. Eventually that liquid will evaporate. So at the beginning, I want a lot of moisture to come out. I want a lot of moisture to come down on the rain shower of sofrito. And then I'm going to stir and check and stir and check. And check and stir. Things are happening. Moisture has cooked off. The color is a little bit more, let's say, burnt orange from bright orange, but it's not there yet. A lot less steam, not so drippy, and it's looking really excellent right around the 16-minute mark. What I'm noticing is a deeper color, and when I'm scraping the sofrito off to the side, instead of big pools of water collecting there, it just looks like the right amount of olive oil in the bottom of the pan. I'm now gonna spice up my soup. I'm sure of all the family recipes of split pea soup, everybody's got their own way. They've got their own base flavors, and these are mine. So I've got fennel seeds. These are whole fennel seeds. I used to get made fun of at Bon Appetit for how much I loved fennel. This is cumin seed. You can replace this with ground cumin. I have the seeds. I'm grinding anyway, so I'm gonna use those. I'm really not trying to get them down to a powder. I just want to break the outer hull of the seeds. They're good to go. And I'm also using some ground turmeric. I especially love turmeric with lentils. I love to put in my sauteed lentils and lentil soup. Delicious together, really earthy, a little spicy, and turmeric also blooms and continues to open up with longer cooking time, so it'll totally transform during the hour and a half that the soup is cooking. It also gives that like deep yellowy orange undertone. The spice is nice. This is a ham hock. Ham hock is a smoked pork product. There's not a ton of meat on it, but what is amazing about ham hocks is that they have a lot of cartilage, they have a big bone, and they're smoked, so they deliver also smoky flavor. So there's fat, there's cartilage, there's some meat. If you are a vegetarian, obviously skip this, just add a little bit more oil to replace the fat that's gonna render. This whole outer part is skin, so it's pretty dense and it's sort of trapping. But what I want is to make sure that the good fat, the collagen, this inner stuff that's happening has a place to go when it renders. So I just snip down the sides to kind of open up a channel. So I'm gonna warm the hock up until I see the fat softening a tiny bit and starting to render. I love the flavor of the smoked ham hock. It is mostly about fat and richness, which you can definitely recreate by just adding a little bit more cooking oil. But the smokiness is elusive. The one product that I've seen that I think could be cool and maybe worth seeking out is smoked soy sauce or smoked tamari. Now that it's warm and sassy and smoky and fatty, I'm going to add the star, the green split peas. It's a good idea to pick through them. Just make sure you're not adding any tiny rocks. I don't think that happens so much anymore. When was the last time you found a rock in your lentils? But I guess it could happen. I want to coat the lentils with some...
Why do you think the peas are lentils?
Green split peas are lentils. Are they not? I believe that a split pea is a lentil that's been split. It's not a big deal, and I was wrong. A green split pea is a pea, not a lentil. But the reason I keep thinking it's a pea is because of these split peas, which are used for making dal, and they are dal, and they're split, but they're lentils. Anyway, every time I said lentil, just replace it with pea. And I'm gonna add some beer. If you don't wanna use beer, but you have some dry cider could totally be used. Now it smells like a pub where the specialty is split pea soup. Like a beer bar where they have one thing on the menu and the one thing that they have is split pea soup. That's what it smells like. This place is called Sappy Pappy's Pea Place. It's the guy that runs it. He's a pretty salty old bird, but he's great at making soup. You could drink beer with the soup, and I want to cook off about half of it. The heat can come up a little bit to get us there faster. I've got 10 cups of water. I really am a firm believer in water for soups when you've got a great sofrito and you've got copious amounts of other ingredients that deliver flavor. You make a delicious stock broth in the process of making the soup. And I would prefer to use water over box stock. So if you have a homemade stock, use it, but otherwise just stick with water. This looks, speaking of water, very watery right now, but split peas have a way of getting super starchy, breaking into smaller pieces. There's a lot of collagen and fat from the ham hock that is also going to thicken the soup. Right now, this looks really pretty. There's oranges and browns, and it's just going to change, right? We're not getting better or worse. We're all changing. The body is always changing. The peas are always changing, and I don't want to put a value on it. I don't want to put a judgment on it. It is what it is, and what it is great. Although the peas have finished their journey, the hock is like mid-journey and needs a little last touch before it can actually be consumed by the humans. I shall now go fishing for my ham hock. Green. A nice meaty hock that's pretty much falling apart. That's what we want. Looks like a Loch Ness monster at this point. Easiest to do this after it's had a minute to cool down. And a good way to check in the pot is to kind of just go in with a pair of tongs. Of course, I'm impatient, so I'm gonna not wait for it to cool down, and it will cool down while I'm messing with it. Wow, it looks cool. There's this big bone in the middle. It's not gonna come off in a super clean way. And this is the thing about a ham hock. It seems like such a big meaty thing at the beginning. And then at the end, when you go in to actually take the meat off, you realize there's not that much meat. There's a lot of other stuff. So for the longest time, I did what my mom always did, which was just take the meat pieces off and then save the bone for stock. And then one day while I was cleaning up my ham hock, I was looking at all of the fat and all of the cartilage and thinking about how delicious those things are. So just kind of as an experiment, I diced up some of the cartilage, called the family over, everybody approved. So now I cut it all up. If that thought does not agree with you, you can just take the meat off and that is totally fine. But this texture, this like bouncy, chewy, springy texture is QQ, which I learned also late in life is a prized texture in Taiwanese cooking. And it's like the texture of boba in boba tea or springy ramen noodles or gummy candy. Like those things are all Q or QQ. And I love that texture a lot. And the ham hock is just QQ to the nines. It's like QQ, Q, QQ. The more Qs is the more chewy. Anywho, that's a meat hunk. And that's like cartilage or something, tendon, connective tissue. If you've ever had ossobuco, you've had some cartilage. Also this way, I just feel like the yield is so much better. I'm just leaning into the beauty of the whole thing. I can just see the comments now. They're gonna be like, she lost me at the cartilage part. And also to my vegetarian friends who I've tried to support throughout the making of this short video. You just skip ahead. Just skip ahead a couple minutes, come back when it's serving time. I didn't say it was all gonna be like roses and Easter bunnies and stuff like that. Like this is real stuff. It's real delicious stuff. 2022, if you're not eating cartilage and connective tissue, like what are you doing? All right, this is very hot, very steamy. Now it's studded with pork nuggets of gold. And there's one more magic step to bring us through. You don't want to make this spice sizzle until you're really ready to serve. And actually what I'm calling a spice sizzle is an Indian technique called tadka or tarka. It's sometimes called bagar or bagar and sometimes called chonk. So depending on where you're from, I think it has a different word. But the technique is really this act of blooming spices, cooking spices out in hot oil. I'm using ghee because I have it. And I learned how to make this from an Indian chef named Vivek Surti, and actually went to his home and his mom showed us how she makes her dal. And her dal is finished with this really bright tadka that had chilies and spices and added this amazing layer of flavor. All right, so definitely have your spices handy when you start. A small pot is best. The mustard seeds may pop. I'm not smelling anything yet, but I'm hearing a lot and seeing a lot. The mustard seeds are going from dark brown to kind of dark gray, and they're definitely crackling and snappling. So as soon as I see a little bit of popping, I'm gonna pull it off the heat, just so the chili flake doesn't burn. Soup's on. The smells are incredible. It's so bright and spicy and mustardy and chili-y. And I have my gorgeous split pea soup. She's perfection. And now, while the tadka is hot, I'm gonna spoon it over, and the interaction of the soup and the spices makes another dash of magic. Split pea is for pretty. Pea, it's pretty. It's so pretty. It's beautiful. It's, you know, it's gorgeous. This is why we love pea soup, because of how beautiful it is. 2022, we are done shaming food. We are all about khaki foods, and all are welcome. I would say the perfect texture is slowly moving. That's the texture that you want at the end. You want to put it in a bowl and see it slowly move. Okay, going in. It's like a chenille blanket, this soup. That's what it is. It is cozy. It's like a fisherman's sweater, but if a fisherman's sweater was made out of cashmere. Because fisherman's sweaters are actually extremely uncomfortable. Well, the phrase that comes to mind, at any rate, is everything green is gold. And this soup is freaking magic. Hello, all you cockadoodle dudes. This is Carla, and I am here today in my kitchen with one of my favorite tall pot recipes, a delicious, warming soup. Today, I am making chicken soup for the soulless and the soul seekers. That is correct. I have a gorgeous chicken. I have a lot of beautiful aromatic ingredients. The chicken actually cooks into the base of the broth. So you poach the chicken in the liquid that then becomes the soup. Everybody simmers and gets shreddy and tender and delicious, topped with crunchy things and cold things and spicy things. And I think that this soup is very heartwarming in a very heartbreaking time. People ask me a lot how to make soups flavorful, and the secret to that is just having tons and tons of aromatic ingredients. One of the first ones I'm gonna throw in the pot is lemongrass. What you wanna do is kind of trim those dry parts, and then I'm just using the back of this cleaver to bruise the stalk. And as soon as I do that, it like becomes juicy. So this is just a way to help release those essential oils and aromas and flavors. Fun fact about lemongrass. Lemongrass is lipophilic, which means its flavor infuses into fat better than into water. So the whole chicken, the chicken skin, the chicken fat is gonna create that giving vibe, giving and receiving. So now that those are bruised, I'm just gonna cut into shorter lengths. We did just kill a mosquito in the kitchen, so I guess the citronella had not been activated. This pot has 4 quarts of just regular cold tap water. This is like a giant flavor bath of ingredients. This is scallions. There's more scallions coming later. Copious amount of ginger, shallot, garlic, turmeric, and star anise, or star anise, how do you say it? Another thing about this soup, which is really nice, is that you don't have to cook anything out. So the time in this recipe is gonna come from inactive simmering, during which you'll be like reading all sorts of uplifting texts, or sending angry mail to people that you need to complain to. Soulless, or the soul seekers, everyone is welcome. But you just don't have to do much. The ingredients are gonna do their own thing. So I've also got half a bunch of cilantro. The other half is gonna be used for garnish. All right, so now the star of the show is the chicken. This is your ordinary whole chicken that you would buy for roasting. You don't have to have it in parts. In fact, it's better to have it whole because it'll take a little longer for it to cook. And during that cook time is where more flavor comes out. It's gonna get poached in this liquid starting from cold. So it's super gentle cooking method. That's gonna keep it like super juicy, super tender. And even though there isn't browning happening, all of the flavors in the soup base are gonna infuse into the chicken. So it's gonna be delightful. And I'm going to season kosher salt, measured amount, which is not the usual, and a good amount of black pepper. And that's it. This is ready to go on the stove, and everything is gonna come up to heat and start cooking together. Now that the pot is at a simmer, I am just gonna go in and skim off any foamy bits. I'm not concerned about skimming fat. I actually want the fat to stay in the pot. So just any little gray bubbles or impurities, can take those off, lower the heat to a low simmer now, and let it cook for about 35 minutes to finish cooking the chicken through. The fun part of this soup is everything that you put on, in, and next to it. So I'm gonna pull these things out of the fridge now that will be toppers. So I've got sesame oil, fish sauce, hot sauce. I'm gonna grab some herbs, scallions, cabbage, and bean sprouts. And this way, everybody can doctor their bowl however they want. And I'll prep the raw things and then keep them cold while the soup is going. You're gonna just do some squeezies.
Would you say that you are soulless or a soul seeker?
My soul could use some thawing. I would put it that way. Like my soul needs to go on a tropical vacation and just get warmed up again. But who doesn't need a tropical vacation? That chicken's kind of having a tropical vacation. It's in there with all those aromatics, all those delicious, warming spices. You could use any kind of cabbage. You could use Savoy. You could use regular green cabbage. You could use a cute little pointy cabbage. I really love purple for the color. You know, they say that cats will steal your soul, that you shouldn't sleep with a cat because they'll suck your soul right out of your nose. But I let my cat, my black cat, sleep with my first child in his crib, and guess what? His soul was not sucked through his nose, but my pediatrician did get mad at me. She just looked at me and she was like, don't do that. But she was kind of a cold-hearted soul. Why would you do anything to these? These are incredibly beautiful. Beautiful Thai basil, pluck, pluck, drop in your guy. There's a lot of things in my book that says that I don't do anymore. And that's what I want you to do when you read my book. You'd be like, why would I thinly slice that? And I would say, yeah, that was like a different version of me. And this version of me just wants sprigs. Oh, hi, Peg. She's here to suck my soul. Peggy, don't do it. Peggy, you don't really like scallions. Wow, cameo Peg. She saw Marge get that cameo in the other video, and then she arrived. Everybody gets a cameo this week. I just think it's funny that I talked about a black cat sucking a soul, and then who arrived to like affirm other black cats. That's some bean sprouts. I like the big crunchy guys. Now that the chicken has been going for 35 minutes, I want to pull it so it doesn't overcook. And any aromatics that kind of got dragged out, I'm just putting those back in the pot. So this mixture is chickeny and it's great. I'm gonna let it reduce. It's gonna become even more concentrated, more reduced, more infused, and more delicious. But I don't want the chicken to keep going that entire time or it will become dry and stringy. I'm gonna wait until the chicken cools down a little bit. It'll be easier to handle, and then I'll just be able to pull all of the meat directly off of the bones. While the chicken cools down, it's kind of the perfect amount of time to start soaking my rice noodles. Check the directions on the brand of rice noodles that you get. These are soaked in tepid water for about 45 minutes. Being awkward and making a mess is actually hurting my soul. After making a mess like that, I need some soul warming. Now that the bird is cool enough to handle, I'm going to remove the skin, the bones, and tear the meat into small pieces. You barely need a knife for this. One thing that I am like pleased and delighted about is sort of this texture of the chicken, like incredibly tender, pulled right off the bone. I'm just gonna pull it ultimately into shapes that like I want to find in my bowl of soup. They're gonna be these nice, really nice bites of chicken. Hi, Peggy. Do you want a piece of chicken? Okay. Last little bits of chicken are shredded. This is definitely something I'm gonna save, stick it in the freezer and use it for another stock, another day. The soup, I'm gonna taste it now for deliciousness. Super chickeny, spicy, gingery. All right, so I've got a strainer and a really big bowl. If you don't have a bowl this size, you can use a clean pot to strain. Ooh. It ends up being about 3 quarts of liquid. So when you're choosing your bowl or your other pot to go into, that's about how much space you need. So now I'm just pressing down on the solids to get the rest of the deliciousness out of them. Now this goes back in here. Obviously, if you had strained into a pot, you could just keep it in that pot and go back on the stove. In my honest and personal opinion, this tastes delicious, but it's like a little thin. My solve for that was to add a can of coconut milk, kind of on like a whim. It was like, give it a little sweetness, more fat. It just rounds out all of those flavors as like fatty ingredients often do. So in order to get these flavors to just get to know each other for a minute, I'm gonna put it back on the stove for 5, just for them to have a chance to like do their thing, meld. Chicken's going in. It's gonna heat through and it's gonna absorb more of these flavors. All right, I have gorgeous soup. I have my soaked noodles and I'm making a bowl for me and a bowl for my other self, my higher self. Which is which, we don't know. I think part of what is so pleasing about the soup is obviously it smells amazing. There's also been this like warm vapor traveling through the house today. And the color is also that like orangey hue, so it's like very warming. So if your soul is cold and dark, or your heart is blackened and frozen, then maybe this little bit of warmth is also very, very nice. This version of myself is having basil, and this other version of myself is gonna have cilantro. And you tear the herbs and you smell all the smells. So I think this version of myself for crunch is a cabbage energy. And this other version is more sproutly and sprightly. A scallion is rooty and like getting down there. So we need to be earthly. And then whimsical. Honestly, one of the best parts about the colder months is that citrus is in season. It's the only time of year where I'm really jealous, very jealous of the West Coast people. So yeah, youthful vim and vigor that we get. This version is a little funky, a little fish sauce funk, maybe a little salty. This one is toasty and warm and more gorgeous color. Yeah, set your heart on fire. And I'm gonna dollop because we should all like have a little plots and a little flair to ourselves. 2 chicken soups for 2 kinds of souls. The soul that is cold but wants to be warmed, and the soul that is warm and healthy and vimmed and vigored and whimsical and thought out. So yeah, I would never do this in the summer. You would never put something on your stove to simmer away for hours and have like hot steam going all the way through the house. But right now, with a little like, I'm not saying I'm wearing tweed, but like a little tweed moment, a little cozy something. It's really good. And yeah, if you're seeking a soul like in the bottom of a bowl of soup, then like you might find it. You just might find it. Hello, soupy groupies, it's Carla, and I am here today in my kitchen to make one of my favorite things, which is soup, very specifically greens, beans, and sausage soup. We all know that beans have mythical, magical properties. I've talked about it at length on this channel. These are legumes. We're just gonna fly right past that and wish you, heading into this new year, just prosperity, joy, luck, happiness, and growth. It's gonna start with the bean. It's gonna finish in a bowl of soup. Please come along for the ride. Beans to the rescue. Like all of my soups, there is a sofrito involved in this recipe. A sofrito is a basic vegetable base. It could be called mirepoix where you're from. It could be called the Holy Trinity where you're from. And we have done the sofrito extensively in other videos. So I have my chopped veg already ready. For today, what I want to do is actually start with the sausage that is going to end up in this soup. And I'm doing the sausage first so that I can capture the sausage drippings and then use that in addition to olive oil to sweat out the sofrito. So it's just giving more flavor. It's a way to utilize that fat and incorporate it into the base of the soup. Starting with a bit of olive oil in the pan to get the party going. I have 4 sausage links. You could use hot Italian, you could use sweet Italian, you could do half and half, 3 in 1, whatever you want to do. You could also use bulk sausage meat and then you wouldn't have to do the step that I'm going to do now, which is taking off the casings. So if you are a vegetarian and you want to make this soup, instead of doing the sausage step, what you're going to do is double the amount of olive oil to make up for the renderings that you don't have. And maybe start with like 8 ounces of chopped mushrooms, shiitakes or creminis or any kind of mushroom that you like. Some winter squash would also be nice in this mix with the greens and the lentils. So those are the things that I would use if I were a vegetarian. As I add the sausage to the pan, I'm just gonna break it up a little, but I'm gonna go back in with a spoon and break it up a lot. It just helps so it doesn't all like want to be in one big clump from the beginning. I'm gonna let the sausage go until it's nice and brown and starting to crisp, but not completely cooked through. It's gonna go back into the soup towards the end, but for now, I'm just looking for browning and rendering. I've got some nice browning happening underneath. The sausages feel really bouncy, really juicy. They've released a good amount of fat. So at this point, I'm just gonna remove them with a slotted spoon because I actually want all the drippings to stay in the pot. And if you were at all concerned that this wasn't enough fat, don't you worry. I'm gonna add more extra virgin olive oil. So the olive oil is like more than a cooking medium. It's a flavor. It's part of what is going to become almost like a braising liquid for the sofrito. I've talked about this in the other video, so I won't go on and on about it, but this is a lot of sofrito. We need to sweat it down to a smaller amount so that it becomes concentrated, really flavorful. It really becomes the backbone of the soup. We want this to go pretty low and slow. So I'm gonna season at the front with salt and pepper. I definitely believe that cooking is alchemy and alchemy is magic, and so cooking is magic, and so I'm a witch, basically, is like what it comes down to. So if we are like infusing all of our wishes and dreams for this new year, like these little vegetables on an atomic level are like the tiny little kernels of magic that are like all being placed in your consciousness, and they're gonna flourish through the year, but you have to nurture a little bit of nurturing at the beginning and putting like a little love and attention and then stepping back and letting nature take its course. I'm gonna cover the pot now and let this go at a lower heat than I did the sausage and start sweating out, start concentrating. Checking the sofrito about halfway into the 16-minute cook time. Things are coming along really, really great. There's a lot of liquid, it's simmering. There's no browning, which is what I want. I'm gonna cover it back up. I've got a couple bunches of Tuscan kale. You could use any kind of kale. Red Russian, I love curly kale. You could also use other kind of hearty greens like escarole or other kinds of soup greens. It's a good amount of greens, and that is also not just so that we'll have like some greens here and there in the soup, but that the flavor of the greens will also become like a very foundational, integral flavor in the soup. Would you like one of these? Do you want to take this with you? Okay. There you go. See you later. I'm gonna peek at the sofrito again. It looks fabulous and juicy and glorious and very hydrated. Now that the kale is done, there are a couple of basic spices that are gonna go into the soup, and one of them, the cumin, I want to crush the seeds a little bit so that you're not biting into a whole seed. So I'm gonna take this. So this is really just to break the hull of the cumin seed. It's gonna continue to like soften up in the soup. Okay, this is what you wanna see when the sofrito has reached its end point. You can start to see that there's olive oil bubbling up through the vegetables now instead of just seeing steam or water. I'm gonna drop in these bay leaves, and if you have fresh bay leaf, like go ahead and add that as well. This is turmeric. I love the flavor of turmeric and lentil together. It might not be like traditional in sort of an Italian leaning soup, but I just love the combo. And it also gives this beautiful, like golden, sunny color. And then I've got the cracked cumin. Some people don't like cumin. If you don't like it, definitely don't use it. You could use fennel instead. You could use another seed like coriander would be nice in this. Mustard seeds would be really complementary to the turmeric, so you can mess around. And I'm just stirring these in to bloom the spices in the oil that has now kind of collected in the bottom of the pot. And you'll smell right away, seeing a really beautiful color change as well right away. Spices are bloomed, fragrant, orangey, delicious. This is tomato paste double concentrated. When you're buying tomato paste, if you have a choice, buy the one that's double concentrated. It just is double concentrated and has more flavor payoff for the same quantity. So I'm gonna add a couple tablespoons of that. And I also realized this is one of those recipes that could be just a family recipe, like beans and greens. Like everybody's got a version of that. I think what makes the soup like personal and delicious or nostalgic for you are the spices that go into it. So changing that up every once in a while is just one of the subtle ways that we can make like an old recipe feel new. And I want to see this also change color from kind of this more orangey red to a little bit more of a brick red. That's going to take a minute. All right, tomato paste cooked out, looking orangey, looking burnt sienna, looking all of those things. I'm adding the lentils. Once in a while, you're gonna find a tiny little rock in your lentils, so just pick through them before you go ahead and dump them in. Coating lentils with the spices. And 10 cups of water. If you have 10 cups of stock, baby, go for it. I do not. You could even have like a quart of stock and do the rest water. You could drop a bouillon cube into this if you want, but I really do feel and want to assure you that a properly cooked sofrito, all of the greens, the good seasonings is gonna give the soup all the flavor it needs. Raising the heat to bring everything to a simmer. I've also got a couple of parm rinds that have been in my freezer. You are saving your parm rinds, I hope. If you have made the soup vegetarian or you're cooking for vegetarians, check with them first that they're cool with parm. It's approaching a simmer. I'm adding all of the greens. So because lentils don't cook for that long, it's only 45 minutes, I don't want to keep the sausage in the pot for that cook time. I think sausage gets really tender if it's just been cooked or if it cooks for like 2 hours. Somewhere in the middle can end up feeling dry and rubbery. It's gonna come back at the end, heat back up, just warm through, and its flavor will be its flavor. So once this is at a simmer, I'm gonna lower the heat just to maintain a gentle simmer and let it go until the lentils are tender and the greens are really silky, which will be less than an hour. All right, timing has been spot on. 45 minutes in, my lentils are creamy and dreamy. My kale is silky, and I can add the sausage and heat that through. Hot sausage. That's what the world wants, right? That could be on your New Year's goals. Hot sausage, period. You do with that what you want to. This is delicious. I love how textured it is. I love how there's plenty of broth, but there's also plenty of everything else. Giving a last taste. Could use a little more salt, which is fine. I held back, you know, like putting the sausage in at the end. You just want to make sure you're not going overboard. More peps. And if you wanted to add like a chili flake at this point or something like that, that would be really nice. I'm gonna finish this with a few drops of vinegar. Vinegar and lentils are such a great combination, and for kind of a rich, you know, fatty, sausagey soup, a little bit of brightness at the end is gonna be great. You can really do this with any kind of long cooked food or any kind of bean soup that's in your repertoire, but I think especially with lentils, like, they're just really good together. I'm having this today with a side of Carol's fried bread. It is also a family recipe, and we did this one in a video too, so that one will be linked. This whole soup is just making me feel better about everything, kind of. I mean, if this soup is the portal into the new year, then I feel very, very good and warmed and taken care of. This is like the welcome mat for the future. And the future looks like hot sausage. Are you a daddy? Are you a daddy who loves red wine? Are you a daddy who loves red wine and vinegar? Then you need to get yourself a bottle of Frankie's famous red wine vinegar. This is made by my daddy, my actual daddy, with the wine that for some reason or another, he just didn't finish that night. It's sassy, sour, bold, and beautiful. Every label comes with a sticker back and some of Frank's special Scotch tape, because it wouldn't be secure if it wasn't taped on. Go to daddypasta.com, $6.99. Hello to all the beefsteaks who are watching out there. This is Carla, and I'm back again in my kitchen today for a high summer special recipe from That Sounds So Good. Today I am making the dead simple tomato soup in the style of sauce. This dish was inspired by the last little swipe of tomato sauce that you have when you're eating like spaghetti with a fresh burst tomato sauce and you drag your bread through it and it's so delicious. I was thinking about that and I was like, why can't we just have a whole bowl of that? So that's what I wanted this tomato soup to taste like. It also includes a trick for making thinly sliced toasty garlic chips that I'm going to show you how to do. This recipe is stupid easy, and it is the one that you want to make in high summer season where the tomatoes are abundant and bodacious. This is your high summer soup, and it's super. So when you're buying a tomato, you want to look for tomatoes that are heavy for their size, which means they're nice and juicy and not shriveled up and sad inside, and they should smell really good. So, you know, get in there with your schnoz and give them some smells so good. Yeah, my next book actually is gonna be called That Smells So Good. I wanna shout out, great comment that we got from a viewer to talk about tomato types. I'm using a beefsteak. I'm on the Northeast. Jersey beefsteak, one of the greatest tomatoes. I would not use heirloom tomatoes for a sauce. It would seem a little bit like a waste because the beauty of an heirloom tomato is the beauty of the heirloom tomato. They're all different colors and sizes. They have really cool, wiggly outside shapes. And for something like that, I would make a caprese or just a beautiful fresh tomato salad and not necessarily puree it into a sauce. Generally, soup and sauce tomatoes are gonna be the same because you're looking for high flesh, low seed ratio. Plum tomatoes, you're gonna hear that a lot, but anything in that kind of oblong shape is gonna be a good soup and sauce tomato. I love to make this soup and I love to make big batches of sauce at the very end of tomato season wherever you are. You will find at the farmer's market bins marked seconds, and those are tomatoes that maybe got bumped along the way, got a couple bruises, maybe they're juicing out. They're usually so much cheaper, like half the price per pound, and that is also a really great choice because they're getting pureed. It doesn't matter if they have a little bruise on them. And also, can we embrace imperfections finally? Like, it's not even an imperfection, it's character. I have a bruise on my shin right now, and you know what it's from? It's from a GD barbell smacking into my shin. I wear it with pride. You've been places, you've done things. Same with the tomatoes. Celebrate, embrace, puree. Eat, enjoy, live. Today I'm using my food mill. I love my food mill. I'm obsessed with it. I want to use it as much as possible. I'm going to use it to puree this because I want that kind of rustic texture in the soup, but you could absolutely do this by pulsing it in a food processor. Just don't over pulse because you don't want to aerate the tomato. If you've ever tried to make like salsa in a food processor and you end up with a bunch of pink foam, we don't want that. So you would gently pulse to get to the texture, or you could also grate the tomatoes on the large holes of a box grater if you don't have a food processor. So we have analog and electric options. The grandmas would definitely have had a food mill. So you can see as I start to get down to the bottom here, mostly what's left is skin and seed because the flesh is getting pushed through. Some of the seeds and some of the skin is going to get forced through the little holes in that disc, and that's okay too. It's all very tomatoey. You can use these seeds and what's left of the skin as compost. You could throw it into your next veggie stock if you want to freeze it and keep your scraps and do that, or you could just inhale its deliciousness. It's definitely loose. It's like free flowing, but it has some heft to it. It has like a little bit of weight to it. So that's our pureed tomato. I would like to point out, as of yet, I have not gotten any on my jumpsuit. I'm gonna make some garlic chips, which are going to be a garnish for the soup, but they're also going to flavor the oil that the tomatoes are cooked in. I'm using my mandolin. If you were cutting by hand, you're just gonna wanna go pretty thin. If they're too thin, you just won't have any control. They'll be so thin that they cook almost instantly. So I wanna give myself like a little bit of a buffer by having a slightly thicker piece of garlic. If you have a slightly thicker piece of garlic that you cook into that crispy little chip, you just have more to bite into. This is a one pot situation. Choose a sauce pot that's big enough for the tomatoes to go in afterwards, because I'm going to use the same pot to make the garlic chips as I do the soup. It goes in one right after the other. And importantly, we are going into a cold pan. The reason I'm starting cold is again for control and sort of gradually bringing up the temperature of the garlic in the oil rather than dropping these thin slices of garlic into hot oil, because you wouldn't get a nice even browning and you also would be sort of stressed out to get them out of there fast enough. Before turning on the heat, I'm gonna stir all of these in. Take a little picture for your Instagram now so you can have a before and after. And I'm gonna start over medium. Garlic is sticky. Because of that, the chips are actually gonna wanna stick to each other. So as the oil heats up, kind of try to encourage everybody to have their own real estate in the bottom of the pot. I love adding the pepper to the beginning of the heating of the oil as well, because it is gonna bloom the pepper. It's gonna extract all of those essential oils. That's good. Here's what the book says. Cook, stirring frequently until the garlic is pale golden and starting to crisp, period. You know what's missing from that? And I cannot believe I opened this book and saw it. No time. I gave no time cue, which is really, really unusual for me and for the 700 people who copy edited this book. So we're gonna find out exactly how long it takes today. I'm seeing some beautiful translucency. I'm seeing some curling of the edges. I'm hearing sizzling. People are not sticking. We're very close. I'm seeing light sand color on some of the edges and the thinner guys. I'm taking these out. They're gonna be our garnish and our topper, and leaving the oil behind. I'm not using a paper towel for reasons I don't quite understand, but that's how I wrote it in the book, and I stand by it. I'm separating them so that they don't stick together. All right, you can hear. They're nice and crisp. That took 8 minutes. If you have your book handy, please go ahead and mark it up. Thank God people were here timing, because I was not. Still over medium heat, I have my beautiful garlicky, peppery, delicious oil. Here's my pureed tomatoes. You should expect to hear that sizzle, because again, we have a liquidy thing going into a hot, oily thing. I've managed to get tomato juice a lot of places today, but still not on my jumpsuit. Crushed red chili. You could skip this if you're not a spicy person. And this, I now want to see come to a simmer, raising the heat just a bit. As this is coming up to a simmer, I'm gonna dunk in my fresh basil. I'm leaving these on the stalks and not taking the leaves off because I wanna be able to remove the basil later. So this is like basil tomato tea infusion happening. And that's another reason that a shorter cook time is gonna preserve all of the fresh aromas of this. And the goal here is to truly, unlike the garlic, as quickly as possible, cook the tomatoes until it's slightly thickened, which is going to take about 16 to 18 minutes because I did have a time for that. Soup's on. So what I love that I'm seeing is like the really beautiful, still bright red orange color is intact. Question some of you might ask would be, Carla, would that be a good sauce for pasta? Because I made it taste like the delicious ends of a pasta sauce. And the answer is totally. I would cook it down a bit more. Then it would be great, but we're not here for pasta today. We got our gorgeous garlic chippies. A little more chili flake. A little flaky salt. A little drizzle drazzle. If you have an oil that you've been hanging on to because somebody told you you should just use it as a finishing oil, use it today.
Oh my God, stop.
Oh my God, it's so good. I could cry. This is like the kind of cooking you want to do in summer. It's so simple. It's all about like 1 or 2 ingredients. It tastes amazing. 1 pot. The stove is not on for a long time. This is gonna be a really good bite. Serve it with bread. In conclusion, I would like to congratulate myself for not getting tomato on my jumpsuit. Hello, my little beans, it's Carla, and I'm here again in my kitchen today with a beloved recipe from That Sounds So Good. Today I'm making black bean soup with topper Whoppers. This is a unsoaked bean moment from me. I am on record as a super soaker. I'm not soaking the black beans because we're actually leaning into expanding and celebrating their long cook time as they simmer over the warm, burbling heat with the aromatics that I've added. Once the soup gets simmering, it is really like a comeback in 2 hours kind of a moment. You can also use that inactive time to pull your topper Whoppers together. When it is soup time, everybody can sit down, load the top of their soup up with the Whopper and the topper of their choice. I do hate the cold and I hate the darkness and I truly hate winter, but I love soup. So let's lean into it. That Sounds So Good was very much about time, and it is about learning that you start cooking the longest thing first. While that is going, that opens up inactive time for you as a cook. The beans take the longest. One of the things that I'm doing here is I'm just gonna start cooking the beans and then essentially make a sofrito separately, because the sofrito takes like 20 to 30 minutes to like chop everything and get it cooking. I don't want to wait to start my beans for that time. So this is a choice that I made during development to like, you know what, get the beans going, make the sofrito on the side, and then bring them together. Yes, it introduces another pot, but it reduces like an hour, so I think it's worth it. 4 quarts of water. I think I was specific about measuring the water because this is all gonna cook down and then become the right consistency of soup in the end. Normally, if I was cooking beans, I would just say, add enough water to cover them by a couple of inches. If I called for 4 quarts, I don't know, guys. I wrote this thing in 2020. Like, I must have had a reason. Can I remember what it was? Absolutely not. Do I trust the recipes in the book? 1,000,000,000%. Can I recall the name of my child without saying a bunch of animals' names? No. The next thing that takes the longest is soaking the dried chilies. I'm using a variety of chilies that I have chosen for a mix of spice and fruit and heat. The entire recipe is linked in the video description, all of the chilies and the amounts. But before I soak them, I'm getting rid of the stem and the seed pod, because what I'm doing in this blender jar is soaking the dried chili to rehydrate them, to make them blendable. And I don't want all of the seed because they could become bitter. It could also be too spicy. One hot tip about chilies, 2 things actually. When you buy them, even if they're packed in a little plastic like cellophane bag, squeeze through the bag and make sure that the chili is pliable. That means it's not an old, sad, dry chili. The other thing that I learned, and I don't always have the space to do this, but the best place to store your chilies after you got them home is in the freezer. My freezer is absolutely jam-packed, but I think I do have a bag of chilies in there. So that's what you should do. So I've got my chilies. I also have some chipotle and adobo, which has smokiness and it has a lot of really good spice and it has a lot of that fruitiness. Big payoff, love them. I'm gonna take 2 of these guys, whatever liquid is hanging off of them, and add them to the other chilies. Even though these guys don't need to be soaked, it's just like easier to get all the chilies into one apartment together so you don't have to think about it anymore. And I'm covering this with water that just came to a boil. So these are gonna soak, they're softening, they're plumping, they're hydrating. Set aside. Moving on to the aromatics. So this is what I referred to as a sofrito, or cooking out the aromatics. Regular yellow onions, and a fresh serrano chili. You could substitute with a different like medium hot chili. You could use a jalapeno, you could use a Fresno. And if you don't want so spicy, just like the dried chilies, you could take the seeds out of this as well. These days, you never know what you're gonna get. Sometimes you get a serrano and it literally tastes like a green bell pepper, and some of them will burn your face off. So I usually taste them and then decide. Let me take from the center. Oh, it's hot. That one is hot. So all the seeds are gonna come out. Spice isn't a flavor, it's a sensation. You guys knew that, right? You're all smart. You know, don't touch your eye, don't touch your nose, don't touch your underclothes after handling a chili. You know what kind of sponsor I have not been able to land? And you guys can like help me out a little bit with this. I just want to land like an ingredient sponsor. So let's make that happen. Like the pepper people, I mean, I've used 4 peppers already. All the people on the pepper people panel, call me. Like the kale board, that was a thing at one point. The finely dicing is because I want them to cook more quickly. The other reason we're finely dicing as opposed to like rough chop for this is because I'm not gonna puree all of the soup, and I don't really wanna come across like a 2-inch hunk of onion. By cutting them this size, these vegetables are really gonna melt into the soup. They're gonna give up all of their goodness. And you're not gonna like, it's not a vegetable soup, it's a black bean soup. We're all crying now. In the amount of time that it took to cut the onion and the pepper, the beans already simmered. So we were really like in a very nice little rhythm here. Before I go over to start sweating out the onion and pepper, I'm just gonna measure out and prep the spices that are gonna bloom in that mixture. The only one that really needs to be crushed up is the coriander. It's a full tablespoon. It doesn't need to be powdered or anything, but coriander has like that husk on it. I just want to break that down. It smells incredible. Good amount of cumin powder. I know, it's a tablespoon. It seems crazy. 4 quarts of liquid, pound of beans, whole lot of other stuff, and thyme. It's not too much. And then I have Mexican oregano, if you can get it. The flavor and the aroma is different than Mediterranean oregano, which is what is usually sold. But if you're going to a store to get your other spices and to get your nice black beans, look for Mexican oregano because it does have more deliciouser flavor. And I'm just crushing that up a little bit with my hands as it goes in to get the essential oils going. Spice mix is ready. Other spices that are going to go in down the line, I have bay leaf and I have cinnamon. Don't have to worry about those right now. It is time to saute. The recipe calls for a neutral oil to cook out the onion and the pepper, but from a previous video, I have a large amount of chicken confit oil. So we made chicken confit with olive oil. So this oil is infused with delicious chicken fat, flavor, and of course we would use that and be delighted. So I just wanted to acknowledge and honor the chicken confit oil, which is now going to be part of the soup. After seasoning the onion and the pepper mixture, I'm over medium high, and I want to cook this until the onions go from being super juicy and bright and crunchy to really, really soft and browning. And that's going to take like 12-ish minutes. Gorgeous, soft, richly browned. I love the amount of fat that is swirling around in the pan because it just makes everything look caramelizing and delicious. And so now I'm going to add the spices. Another reason why there's a good amount of fat in the pan is that you need that fat to toast the spices properly. So they're surrounded in that chicken confit oil, and then they're toasting and they're releasing aroma. It smells really incredible. I can hear that the pan is starting to dry. And at this point, I'm going to deglaze with a couple ladlefuls of my bean liquid. So this is the part of the recipe that might like intuitively not totally make sense, because normally if you were making soup, you would cook your onion and your peppers, and then you would add the spices, and then you would pour in the beans and the liquid. So this is that moment where like this has been going for 40 minutes already, but I wanted to get all of the flavor out of the bottom of the pan, any of the onion juices, any of the browned bits. So I'm using the soup liquid to deglaze that pan because I want all of those flavors to get captured and I want them to be together for the rest of the bean simmering journey. So that's what's going on here. Not totally normal, not standard, but not dumb. This whole time, these peppers have been softening in our hot water. Now it's time for them to meet their maker and go party with their other bean friends. I don't really want to have the texture of like little bits of pepper skin in the soup, so I'm gonna go a little bit further until it's really like micro blend. It smells really, 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 really good. Okay, so this kit and caboodle, delicious, smoky, earthy, totally different than the like zing and the herbaceousness and the cuminy coriander flavor that we got from the spices. This is like your low, like foundational flavor. And it's going straight into the broth. At this point, the beans have been going for 45 minutes, something like that. I'm gonna taste the liquid, I'm gonna taste the bean. But these beans have a ways to go. So I want to make sure the liquid is properly seasoned because now all of the flavors that we've added to the pot need to be sucked in to the inside of the bean, and the bean is returning the favor by giving beautiful bean liquid back into the body of the soup. And if you see foam rising on the surface, just go ahead with a spoon and scoop any weird foamy bits off. So tasting as you go, especially with something that is long cooked, it just starts to create in your mind like an understanding of where we started and where we're going. So if you are in the habit of tasting as you go, you're really gonna start to understand on like just a sort of body receiving information, not even words, how flavor changes. And then that's going to become a thing that when you taste something, your body is just gonna like know that it's delicious, and it will have the other reference point of like, that wasn't quite ready, that wasn't quite there. Now I understand what it tastes like when it's closer, and then truly understanding like what it tastes like when it's done. So this is gonna be what I expect, thin, a little watery, maybe more on the bitter end from those peppers that haven't really cooked out and found their sweetness yet. The bean hasn't really given its flavor yet because it's just a hard shell of itself. The spice is coming through, definitely taste the oregano. It's not too cuminy. And the bean isn't crunchy, but the bean sure as hell isn't delicious. And nobody in their right mind would say it was creamy. So, a little chalky, a little floury, but it's like, it's all there, and it's just gonna be more there. So, a little dash of salt, stir, foam, see ya, gonna go for a walk, pick up my Fritos. Soup's simmering and soup is almost on. I have collected an array of many different small bowls for all of the topper whoppers. If it were just like casual Sunday night family dinner, maybe I would do 3 or 4 of these. So chef's choice, but some of the classics are here. We have some cilantro sprigs. I've got an avocado, which I shall dice, queso fresco and cheddar. There's more of the Mexican oregano, my sour cream, gonna throw some chips in a bowl. So, have fun with it, you know? Cosmo, thank you for joining us today.
Of course, I love soup.
Good soup. Remember we were saying that
I remember when
so
we were saying
much.
that. Where did that come from?
That was from that meme with Adam Driver. Good soup. Good soup.
Good soup.
You and your brother used to say it all the time. I'm gonna get us some soup.
Good soup. I like soup, especially the good type. And I like it when there's an assortment of stuffs around. because you can grab a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this and a little bit, and just make your own day. Oh my God, where'd that come from?
Talk and do. Do and talk.
Oh, wow. Okay. I like avocado, so I'm gonna just put that in there. And I like lime with my bean soup, and then cheese for color and a little bit of flavor.
I agree with you on the lime.
Dollop.
Please dollop away, sir. Oh, I think you need another spoonful.
I think we need another
right?
spoonful.
Don't we need
for that.
another spoonful?
I think so.
I think so too. Can I have a couple chips? Por favor. I'm an inner chipper.
I prefer my chips not soggy.
I like a crispy gonzaki. See, something for everyone.
I love lime with my soup.
Oh gosh, it's good.
Oh man,
Right?
this makes the winter kind of okay.
Exactly. And yet, the darkness of the soup does remind me
Of
the dark cave.
of the darkness in winter,
The dark cave.
and when it's dark at 5 o'clock.
You know when you lift up the comforter for Peggy and she goes in?
Yeah, and she goes in, and then you make a little tent with your knees.
Yeah,
That's really fun.
that's what this is like. The dark cave of
Of the peg.
the warmth
Of the peg cave.
the warmth and the spice of the black bean.
This soup is really just perfect for the winter. It's dark, but with a little bit of sour cream, makes it just light enough to not be too depressing. And then with some lime, you really lighten it up, and then some freshness with the cilantro, and you've got the best meal in the whole entire world.
Hello, my oxes and foxes. It's Carla, and I am here again in my kitchen today with a brand new recipe, French onion and oxtail soup. It has come to my attention recently that the people would like a French onion soup, and I am happy to oblige. In the recipe development process, I watched lots and lots of French onion soup videos, looked at a bunch of recipes, and my number one beef is that at a certain point, they just tell you to grab 2 quarts of delicious homemade beef stock, but nobody tells you how to make it. So for my recipe, I developed an extremely delicious fortified beef stock. So I'm gonna show you how to make the stock on day 1, which is how I recommend. And then I'm also gonna show you what I did to make the caramelized onions also better. And then we all know the best part of the French onion soup is spooning into the molten cheesy layer. I dare declare that this cheesy layer is gonna make every other cheese topping look like a sad, battered, withered, ripped apart surrender flag just lying in the dirt. Today's episode is sponsored by one of my absolute favorite brands, Goldilocks. We are in year 2 of working with Goldilocks, and I could not be more proud to rep this brand. At this point, I'm cooking with Goldilocks. I got my mom cooking with Goldilocks. My older son has the Goldilocks up at college. A bunch of you guys are already enjoying Goldilocks pans. What's awesome about Goldilocks is that they believe in really well-designed and purposeful cookware. And I really believe that having well-made, purposeful cookware is going to make you a better cook. There's nothing more upsetting than going out and venturing out on a recipe and to have it not work out, and it's really not you. It could be your pan. So if you're ready to upgrade to some serious cookware, but you don't want to buy something and absolutely blow your budget and break the bank, these are the pieces that you want to have. Go to cookgoldilocks.com/Carla to browse the collection, pick out what will work for you in your kitchen. These pieces are backed by a lifetime guarantee. There's really nothing not to love. We love Goldilocks. Go check them out, cookgoldilocks.com/Carla. Get to it. French onion soup or no French onion soup, everybody should know how to make a great beef stock, and we don't talk about it enough. We're talking about chicken stock all the time and mushroom stock and mushroom trimmings all the time. We need to be talking about beef stock. Every stock is going to follow some basic principles, right? There's bones, water, aromatics. That's essentially it. But in each of those, you have choices. I am choosing really fantastic bones. I wanted meaty bones. I wanted bones that were going to give a lot of flavor, but also a lot of body. collagen richness, the kind of stock that when you take it out the next day, it's like, ugh. So in order to get there, I was like, oxtails. Oxtails are amazing. They have bones. They also have a lot of collagen, and they have just a really perfect ratio of delicious meat. And because they're like a braising kind of a cut, they're meant to be long cooked. They have a lot of flavor to give. So this is 50% oxtail bones, and then the other 50%, I'm just calling for a meaty beef bone, because that meat is also giving a lot of flavor in addition to the bone, which is obviously more flavor, but also collagen, the richness, all of that body is coming from bones. So at My Fantastic Butcher, they have just in their like freezer bags of different kinds of bones, and they have beef neck bones. So beef neck bones kind of had everything I was looking for. A lot of bone, but some nice beefy bits too, some nice connective tissue, which is that collagen, the body, the richness, the gelatin. I'm roasting in a 12-inch skillet. I find this to be better than roasting on a rimmed baking sheet because you capture more of the juices, and then it's also a lot easier to deglaze and pour these bones into the stock pot later. And these pans can go stovetop to oven, no sweat. So my oven is at 400 degrees. I'm gonna lightly salt. A lot of people will tell you don't salt the stock because if you reduce it later, it can get too salty. Fine, that's on my mind. I'm salting sparingly, but I do believe that it's gonna help with the flavor. And then, as I often do, just to get things started, start getting some heat conducting, start moving fats around, I'm adding just a little bit of vegetable oil just to coat. I'm gonna take my rings off and then toss this together with my hand so everything is coated. The reason the soup is so good is because of the beef stock. This is ooh la la. This is très chic. We're doing it the right way. And these are gonna roast until they're really brown, really caramelized. I'm gonna toss them every now and again, but that's gonna take 50, 55, maybe call it the better part of an hour. Roasty bone time. These have been in the oven about 55 minutes. They're really well caramelized. Even the fat is caramelized. There's some hissing and sizzling and good noises like that happening. Straight from here, I'm gonna go into my stock pot where I'm gonna build the whole broth. Any fat or juices that are on your skillet, you just want to make sure that those get into the pot too. And I'm going to cover this with 6 quarts of water. I'm going to start over high heat. To flavor this now, I'm dropping in 2 dried shiitake caps, which give like really lovely umami flavor. And also, stealing from pho broth, I'm adding a couple of pieces of star anise. I'm also gonna add now another thing that gives beautiful color, umami flavor, a little bit more salt. It's just gonna be really nice flavor in the soup. Almost at a simmer, there's already foam, so I'm just gonna skim. These are what the little bits of protein look like. That's like, you know, the blood coagulating. And you just wanna take those off as you go. And essentially this is it for the next couple of hours. So if you stroll by, just make sure that you're at a bare simmer. Give it a skim every once in a while. Set a timer for a couple hours, and we shall be back. This is what your stock is gonna look like at about 2 hours. Not that different. Not a ton of evaporation because we're keeping the simmer really low. The meat on the bones, if you press against it, is gonna feel still very bouncy, very firm. So that's gonna get more tender over time. And then as we've been going, you know, I've got like a bowl of fat like this. I'm just taking that off now with like more of a flat, wide spoon. And you will have quite a bit of beef fat later. If you're chilling the soup, all of that fat's gonna rise and you can take it off once it's chilled. At this point of your stock sitting, you're halfway through, I'm putting in my carrots that are just peeled and cut in half. I learned that peeling carrots is a little less bitter in stock. And this half onion is taken from the total amount of onions that's gonna go into the caramelized onions. and just a handful of thyme to give a little squeeze. This is the community for the second half of the stock simmer. I'm gonna get a little sweetness and brightness from the vegetables that are in here. It's just gonna round out the flavor, and another 2 hours until the meat is more, really has given all it has to give, and the stock is gonna taste like really robust. It shouldn't evaporate too much, but it'll come down a little bit more, and at that point we can strain it. It smells amazing. It looks fantastic. And now I'm gonna show you how I like to strain stock that has lots of bones in it. My method is to have a vessel big enough to hold all of the stock. I have a colander set in there, and that is where I'm just gonna get all the really big things out. If I were to just pour this through a fine mesh strainer, it would splash, it would plop, it would overflow the strainer for sure. And so this way I can get all these big giant meaty pieces out of the way, let them cool down. I do pick through this meat and give it to Marge. I think that eating the carrots is one of the great things that you can do because they're so filled with protein. So I've got a little bit of liquid that came off. I'm just gonna pour that back over here, and then grab a fine mesh strainer and then pour through again. So you can see it's got this really beautiful golden brown, rich color. So once you've strained it, you should have between 4.5 and 5 quarts. You actually have extra stock, more stock than you're gonna need for the soup. And having an extra quart of stock to put into the freezer is just like fantastic secret treasure trove waiting for you. I want to finish seasoning the stock to taste, and I'm using a couple more ingredients that are giving more depth, a little more saltiness, a little more umami, staying in that kind of brown town flavor profile. So a tablespoon of Worcester, and I really like fish sauce to finish off like long braises, long, rich, fatty, meaty things, like a little fish sauce at the end of like a lamb stew is incredible. I'm gonna add a little MSG, which just makes everything delicious and has all of the umami that this is just like an umami bomb anyway. A little more regular salt, because the only salt in this until now has been the little bit that I salted the bones with. Now for the part of the show where I precariously pour something that took 4 hours to make, and everyone here is terrified. And I hope you at home are also terrified, because we love terror. Perfect. 1 quart. Let this cool, then cover and chill. Same for your big batch. Let cool, cover and chill. And I will see you fools tomorrow. I am getting ready for the onion part of the French onion soup. And what I have here is 2.5 pounds of onions. The first time I did the recipe, I was going for like a very thin caramelized onion, which, you know, having done some research, that's what most people do for French onion soup. So I did that. And it took like over 2 hours of active time just to deal with the onions. And then the other thing I didn't really care for was you just get soup that has a lot of like stringy, slippery things in it. So that night I stared at the ceiling and decided, like, what if the onions weren't cut so small? You could get a lot more color a lot faster. And then when you ate the soup, you would actually get like some bites of onion. So that's where I ended up. These are 1/2-inch slices. And this is the pot that I'm going to build the entire soup in. So the broth is going to end up in here and everything else. So I'm going to start with some vegetable oil. You could use olive oil, I guess. I don't think it needs to taste like olive oil. It's more about the sweetness of the onion and the broth coming through. And I use neutral oil to brown the bones. So this is over medium-ish. I want to start a little bit high to get things going. And then I have a little bit of butter and just get this butter foaming. So the first stage is about jump starting the onions, getting them to release a lot of liquid quickly. And then once that process is started, then I can start building color. But this takes about 25 minutes as opposed to like over 2 hours. So that was a good change. The heat, the salt, and the fat are gonna be what starts driving the liquid off. They're sizzling. It's sounding juicy. And now with the heat pretty moderate, I'm going to keep it covered, create steam and pressure, and let these go for about 5 minutes. Check them out. Lots of steam, a little bit of color, which I'm totally fine with. I've got tender, juicy onions that are starting to soften, which is exactly what I want. And this next phase, I'm gonna cook uncovered with the heat medium high and really try to rapidly evaporate liquid, because with a ton of liquid present, you're not gonna get a lot of browning. I can also toss the thyme in now, give a little squeeze. So I want to give these time to like be down on the surface of the pot and start to take color and resist the urge to constantly toss. It's gonna take like 12 minutes. All right, I'm gonna toss and I'm gonna show you what to do if your onions aren't evenly browned, but you're starting to see a lot of browning on the surface of the pan. So if this happens to you, there's 3 things that you can do, and you can do them together individually. One is nudge your heat down. The second thing you can do is just add a splash of water. I don't want a ton of water in here because we just had a whole conversation about steaming. You can just scrape up the browning with a wooden spoon. The third thing you can do, and I'm probably gonna do this in addition to adding that water, is just cover the pot for a couple of minutes. All right, this is where I want to land. I have onions that are really nice and caramelized on the edges. They are floppy without having absolutely no integrity. They're tender, but there's something still there because they're gonna keep cooking in the stock. So I'm gonna deglaze with some white vermouth. If you have white wine open, use that. If you don't drink, use water. Use something like sake would be good. The first batch of the caramelized onions, I actually tried using rye whiskey and it was also good. So, you know, just go rummage around in your liquor cabinet for something that works. So I want to cook off the vermouth. And I'm also using the vermouth to help me release all that fond. My recipe also has a bit of Urfa chili, which is a not too hot chili that has really nice dark raisin chocolatey notes. I'm doing a little more than half a teaspoon. You don't have to use it. You could use a pinch of cayenne or red chili flakes or Aleppo or gochugaru. I always am looking for like that little bit of tingly to balance everything out. This looks great. The vermouth is absorbed / evaporated. Okay, so now I've got all-purpose flour. And the reason the flour goes in is to help give the soup a little bit of body so that you don't feel like you're just drinking stock. I've kept it on a very light ratio of flour. It's a really nice contrast to have the light textured broth with all of the rich cheese and the crouton on top. I'm going to cook this for about a minute just to cook off any raw flour taste. You're not really going to be able to analyze this like as a blonde roux or a darker roux because there's so much color already in the bottom of this pan. So just go with your nose. I'm just gonna slow this down for a second so I can show you the stock that we made yesterday. So this is that layer of fat that I was talking about was gonna rise to the top. So that's a lot easier than like meticulously spooning liquid hot fat off of a simmering soup. Also, you can see the body of this stock is like thicker. It's not freezing cold right now, but that's all of the collagen that has come out of the bones and the connective tissue and the marrow and all that stuff. So this is where the stock and the caramelized onions become onion and oxtail soup. And they need this time to simmer 25 minutes. You want flavors to meld. Now I'm going to add about a half a cup of red wine. Shout out Molly Boz. This is a delicious drinking red wine. Put something into the soup that you're going to drink with dinner. Now for the fun part, butter cheesy toast. So I'm gonna butter some nice slices of bread, like sourdough is really nice. Country loaf, this is a delicious Pullman that has some polenta in it. Whatever toast you'd use to make a crouton is great. I have my toaster oven set to 400 degrees. Set a timer for 6 and then take a look because you don't want to burn them. I burn them. Now I'm gonna make the cheese mixture that goes on top. Classically, it's Gruyere. A lot of people reached out and said like a slice of Swiss cheese is what they really like, or a combo. I wanted something really cheesy. I wanted that Gruyere flavor. I wanted a really great cheese pull. And so I decided to cut my cheese mixture 50-50 with low moisture mozzarella, which is just the mozzarella that comes like shrink wrapped like polio, not fresh mozzarella. And I don't know, I just wanted the cheese topping to like do a little more work. The best video I watched was episode of Julia Child, and she did all these different versions, and one of the versions she did, she finished with grated raw onion. That stuck in my head. I loved that as a topping. So the way that I've interpreted that is just having some thinly sliced scallion greens and scallion whites that I mix into the cheese. Big pinch of Urfa. You do not need salt. If you're using Urfa, I don't really think you need black pepper, but you could use black pepper instead of Urfa. And just tossing this together. Buttery bread. Never gets old. Nice and crispy, nice and brown, but the underside is like a little bit softer. This was a late addition to the recipe, but a little smear of Dijon mustard I think goes so well with cheese, and mustard and onion go so well together. I think we get to make soup now. Oof, 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 oof. The one last thing that I'm going to do at the end of this is season the soup with some sherry vinegar. You could use lemon juice, you could use any other vinegar. Again, long cooked flavors like really come alive and like gel in another way with a little bit of acidity. Yes, oui garçon. Okay, now in order to put soup under a broiler, you need to have the right kind of bowl. I happen to have the right kind of bowl because these are my grandmother's and I've had these forever. They're the perfect, like what you think of when you think of French onion soup. They can catch the spillover and they're pottery, so they're completely impervious to the heat. And we're on foil just because we're gonna have a cheese overflow and it's gonna make cleaning up easier. And you're just going for like a nice ratio of onion and broth. So scoop from the bottom. Crouton on top. If you have an oval piece of bread, just tear it in half so it fits. Ooh, right on the edge. Okay, I don't mind a little tilt. Heaping 1/4 cup per, approximately 2 ounces. I'm gonna put these into the toaster oven and then I'm gonna turn the broiler on. It's all right. Is it all right? Oh, my darling. Oh, my darling. Oh, my God. Ooh. She's beautiful to me. Oh, yes, indeed. Yum. I love the little spotting of brown, but that there's also like cheese lava. I love that the crouton doesn't fit perfectly, so this is like really crunchy, the parts that were up and exposed, but then it's like jubbly and wobbly underneath. Mozzarella to my face. A mozzarella to my face. Mmm. 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 I love the brothy bread. I love that multiple textures off the bread. I really rode the wave of recipe development working on this. There was a point when I was sweating over 2-hour caramelized onions where I wondered, what is this? Why does it exist? Do people really like this? Does anybody eat this? What is the point of this? Which is natural and normal for like somewhere in between stage 2 and stage 3 of recipe development, when you start to wonder if you can cook, if you know anything, if food is good. It all kind of goes into the toilet. And then you have your breakthrough, and then that leads to Act 4, which is triumph and joy and success and overcoming of all hurdles and obstacles, which is where I am now, enjoying my French onion soup. Thank you to Goldilocks for making roasting of my bones possible, for making simmering of my stock possible, and for making melding possible. We love you, Goldilocks. Thank you so much. The beauty of a soup like this and the beauty of spring is that spring vegetables have all of the tender bits, and you can use really all of the vegetable. Today I will be making Green-Estrone. So this is a great example of stem to root cooking, where the tops of these gorgeous veggies are going to end up in one place, and just using the different pieces in different ways. And then also just celebrating the spring bounty, because when you get to the farmer's market and the spring things start springing, the best thing that you could do is like not limit yourself to one of the spring veggies, and you can visit all of the different farmers, and you can snack on a sugar snap pea from one stand, and you can go nibble on a green bean from another one, and then just spread all of the love around to the different farm stands. And then you also can just come home with like a bunch of different things. So as long as your green things add up in the end to somewhere around 1.5 pounds or 2 pounds total, you can use whatever you want. So instead of sugar snaps, you could have snow peas. Instead of scallions, you could have like actual true spring onions. You could have small little onions. People on the East Coast go really crazy for the ramps, which are a type of wild leek, and they have a delicious flavor, and people are psychotic about it and will trample you to get to them. I'm going to put these scallion greens into my herb oil. I'm going to set these aside, the whites for now, and then I'm going to take some of these garlic chives, chive blossoms, jury's out on what we're calling them today, and I'm going to keep the tender tops for the soup, and I'm going to use some of the stem, which is totally edible, for the oil. You could also do this with something like cilantro stems or any kind of flowering herb. So with these stems, I'm gonna go pretty fine. I can feel that they're a tiny bit fibrous, but they're gonna give a really nice crunch. So this will feel like having like a little burst of raw onion that's gonna be tempered by the oil, and then it will be also tempered when it hits the hot soup. So this is really just a like, there are no rules. You're gonna make something herby and oily as your topping. In the original recipe, I didn't say to add salt, but we grow and we change and we learn, and bunnies grow up. So I'm putting salt in it. Olive oil, I think it's 3/8 of a cup, 6 tablespoons of oil, which is how we called for it in the book. If you have an olive oil that somebody gave you that you were like, it felt too precious to open it because you're like, oh, this is the fancy olive oil and I'm not gonna use it just to like saute my veggies, open that bottle of olive oil. Today is the day. A nice, beautiful, green, vibrant, herby, herbaceous olive oil is like gonna be so beautiful in the soup. So this is gonna sit. Look how great it looks already. This is like the most pared back version of a salsa verde that you could ever verde. So now I'm gonna prep the rest of the veg, and I'm gonna cut it however it wants to be cut. Instead of using your thumb, if that's annoying to you, to me, I always get like oxidized stuff under my thumb. It's a little bit annoying. You can take a vegetable peeler and then just unzip your bean. And it's just really fast. So if you want to try that, the peas will be released very quickly. You wouldn't want to eat the outside of this pea because it's too fibrous and weird. You could sock it into the freezer, you could cut them up and use them in a veg stock. Okay, so that's some peas. Let's just stay on peas and move into these sugar snaps. So sugar snaps are tender enough to eat the whole thing. Sometimes they need to be stringed. Sometimes it's fine. Another thing that people might not necessarily know if you're not like a farmer's market person already is that it is totally fine to like take a taste of something at the farm stand. Often the farmers will put little samples out there. One guy's sugar snap peas might be like really sweet and fantastic, and another guy's sugar snap peas might not be ready. So now I've got these nice chunky scallions. The greens are in my herb oil. And I'm gonna put the whites in the soup, and they're gonna act like an onion. And you could use a little baby leek here. You could use the bulb onions. And then here it's like, I could thinly slice, I could slice on an angle. I'm actually gonna go on a little bit of an angle and leave them a little bit bigger. So they're similar in size to these guys. And sometimes when I'm prepping and cooking with my kids, they'll say like, well, what size should I cut this, or how big should it be? And it's also just something I think about as a recipe developer. And it's like, well, it's a soup. So what size vegetable do you want to find in the bowl of your soup spoon? So cut it the size that it'll fit on your spoon. Then I have what can only be described as an adorable and small cabbage with frilly energy. What shape does my frilly, adorable cabbage want to be? I don't know. Let's look at some of these leaves. Outer leaves are going to be bigger than the inner leaves. That creates opportunities. You've probably noticed this when making a Caesar salad. You get into the inner sanctum of that head of romaine, and then the inner guys are just the cutest guys you ever saw. Like, this guy doesn't need to be cut at all. He's perfect. He has a little brown on him. I don't know why, but he can come. Anyway, that's fine. I think they want to be cut like that, so you can see all the parts. And I think that the rib is delightful. Here's another thing. Why are we throwing out the cores? This is a tender core. Are you in touch with your tender core? Your outer edges, yeah, maybe they need to get trimmed every once in a while, but your inner core should be celebrated. It should be embraced. It should be loved. It should be supported. And like, this has been protected in the inner sanctum the whole entire time. And it might want to be around. And then when someone is eating your Green-Estrone, they're going to be like, oh, I'm sorry, what's this, a cloud vegetable? Did you put a vegetable that looks like a freaking cloud into my soup? Yes, I did. It's a tiny cloud. Don't throw that out. Never. Look, it's a cloud floating through the galaxy. Okay, what's left here? We have some green beans, and we have some of these chive flowers. I might not do much to those because they're so pretty. What does a green bean have to offer us? I'll be honest with you, it's March right now at the time of shooting, so they aren't the most sweetest and tenderest. So maybe I'll just go just on a nice long bias. Or I can do two things. Nope, there's no rules. Maybe I'll go I like the idea of the little crosswise. That feels more like it's gonna be in the world with the green peas. No rules, you can do both. So let's do some of each. So for garlic chives, I've used some of the bottoms, and I wanna trim to where it gets more tender, and these will go together. The only thing left that I have today are the potatoes. So I love a soup that has potato and pasta in it. This one does. I just feel like in spring, if you can get a true new potato, I think that new potato is often a misnomer. True new potatoes are the new potatoes. They're the ones that have just come out of the ground. It's a short season, but if you can get true new potatoes, get them. They're like, you could basically eat them raw. So sweet, so tender, so creamy, so lovely. Babies. It's like the veal chop of the vegetable world. I'm cutting these crosswise. You could do quarters, you could really do whatever shape you want. Famously not peeling them, because that's annoying. So potatoes go in at the beginning, so I'm gonna keep them separate. If I was holding them for any amount of time, I would probably plunge them into cold water so that they don't oxidize. But now I'm all prepped up, and we're just gonna go straight into the making. Before the soup's actually on, I want to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, BetterHelp. I think it's important to talk about mental health and share our experiences openly. From managing stress to just the usual challenges of life, therapy is a safe space for working through what's on your mind. You can have your sessions with your BetterHelp therapist through phone calls, video chats, or messaging, and at whatever time is convenient for you and your schedule. BetterHelp's extensive network includes over 30,000 therapists. You just fill out a questionnaire about what you're struggling with, and BetterHelp will use your answers to match you with a therapist who specializes in those issues. You should be comfortable with your therapist, and BetterHelp sets you up for success in that area. Join 4 million other people who have used BetterHelp to start living a healthier, happier, and more enjoyable life. Taking care of your mental health is a crucial part of your overall well-being. Mental health is health, period. Click the link in the video description or go to betterhelp.com/Carla Lalli Music. Using that link not only supports this channel, which then in turn supports my mental health, but you will also get 10% off your first month with BetterHelp. Win-win. I'm over medium heat. I'm gonna start with my fats. So I've got butter and oil. Sweetness of the butter, the green vegetableness of the oil. This is 1, 2, 3. The soup is gonna go in stages. So the vegetables are going to be added kind of at the right time for them. We are cooking everything in the body of the soup because the liquid that I'm gonna use is just water. All right, so I've got foaming butter. Scallions are entering the chat. I want the soup to stay like nice and springy, greenish, yellow. It's gonna get a little brownish, but not like brown. So I wanna soften all my veggies without letting them take on color. So just moderate the heat as needed. Okay, scallions are looking beautiful. They're softening. The inside wrappers of the cylinder are starting to like separate. And next thing I'm going to add is the potatoes because the potatoes take the longest to cook. And to just get them started, tossing them in the oil and the butter. And the surfaces, those cut surfaces are gonna be like really shiny and glossy. And then the cue that I have in the recipe is to look for when the surfaces start to look matte. And that's when you know that you can move on. If I was so specific about it in the recipe, then it must be a thing that I like really saw when I was developing the recipe and I kept it in the recipe. Oh, it's happening. I think why they turn matte is because as they start to cook, the potato starch starts coming out or coming to the surface. Whenever you're cooking and you're looking at a recipe that has a visual cue and a time cue, always cook to the visual cue. Also, if you're looking at a recipe and they have a time cue and they don't give you a visual cue, then that recipe, tear it up, bring it out back, light a fire, and burn it because that's of no use to you whatsoever. I'm gonna add a little bit of chili flake, and I'm also going to add, so the original recipe calls for a 1/4 cup of white wine. I went shopping in my own wine rack. I did not find white wine, but I did find this beautiful bottle of Verjus that I've had for a while and I haven't got into. So Verjus is like a wine that is made with like very green, young grapes. And the flavor is going to be somewhere between like a fruity vinegar and a really light white wine. If you didn't have white wine, but you had some sake lying around, you could definitely use that. If you don't drink, you can just add some water and skip right past this part. Now that these are together, I'm going to cook it until some of the wine has reduced. It's just going to take a couple minutes. I'm in my really wide Goldilocks Dutch oven. All that surface area, things aren't even piled up. It's going to happen in a couple minutes. Okay, so the liquid is reduced by half, and not only that, but the starches from the potatoes are coming out. It's like thickening, like it looks like a delicious pan sauce. And so now I'm gonna add all of the more sturdy vegetables at the same time. So we use these cute cabbages. In the original recipe, I called for bok choy, but so anything in there is gonna work. I've got the cool string beans cut 2 different ways, and the sugar snap peas, and the English peas. And now everyone is in concert together, going down to the bottom of the pot to get liquid and fats coating the new vegetables that just joined. So I'm adding vegetables in layers. I'm also seasoning in layers. So I season the scallions. Now I've added quite a big volume of vegetables that haven't been seasoned, so they need to be seasoned. So what you're looking for at this stage is for all of the green vegetables that you've added to kind of get that vibrancy and start to turn bright green. And I want to see my cabbages just softening a bit. If you have a parm rind in your freezer, which of course you do because we talk about it all the time, add that. You could do a dollop of white or yellow miso. I think that would be like delicious in that same sort of salty world that we're in. And that's just going to give a little more depth and flavor. And then my liquid of choice today, good old spring water. No, it's New York City water. It's some of the best water in the world. This needs to come up to a simmer, so I crank the heat on that until I start to see the bubbles, then lower it to a really nice, gentle simmer. I don't want to knock those potatoes about and get them starchy. And then it's going to simmer just long enough for the potato to be tender. And then all of the other vegetables are going to be at their, whatever that moment is for them. So there might be some silky cabbage, there might be a tender green, there might be a pop of like more of the core of that inner part of the cabbage. So you're going to get a really beautiful mix of textures. We're bunnies, you know what I mean? Like sometimes a bunny is getting a tiny little tender carrot, but the bunny is also not going to turn their nose at a large carrot that might have a little more firmness to it. So this is the vibe. At the same time that that is simmering, I have brought a pot of water up to boil. That's going to be for the pasta. I don't cook the pasta in the soup because the soup will get gummy, and then they will come together very much like what happens at the end of pasta fagioli. The pasta is ready. I'm going to add a little bit of fresh lemon right here at the end. So just a couple wide. The book says one strip. I don't know. It's just like, why did I say one strip? Really? We can't have two strips. I think we can have two strips. It's 2024. Give yourself an extra strip. So this is going to impart obviously a lemony flavor, a brightness, just a little like fresh fairy dust finisher. Okay, so once the lemon is in there and I can smell it, it's fragrant, it's lemony, it's bright, it's sunshiny. I wanted to add these, oh, and some of their water. The chive blossoms. Yeah, it's just like onion water down there. It's not bad. And these are gonna go in just to let them wilt. Pasta's ready as well. I'm just gonna go straight in. This shape is called anelli, and it means rings in Italian. We're getting married to all of the spring fairies. So you could use ditalini, you could use any like small shape, you could use little shells. You could even use mini farfalle for this because it's whimsical and it's fun. It looks beautiful, and I'm gonna grab a bowl and get into it. I have a nice wide bowl. Gonna let you see everything. So pretty, oh my God. Give me a break. And then the delicious scallion oil. Even though the scallion green and chive is raw, as soon as it hits the warm broth, it like also releases its flavors and it tempers it a little bit and softens it. And I want a little cabbage. If you're a Sunday soup person or you're a pasta fagioli person, but now it's spring, you're gonna do like Sunday soup in this incredibly beautiful springy way. It's so easy. It also lets you go to the farmer's market, not really think about what you're buying, buy a bunch of beautiful green, new arrival baby veggies that are just broke through layers and layers of cold, hard earth to be here. Don't think about how many or which, just bring them all home, get into it. Oh my God, we have an inner sanctum, guys. A tiny inner sanctum made its way onto my spoon. You're gonna celebrate inner sanctums, you're gonna celebrate tender cores, you're gonna celebrate your greens and leafies, you're gonna celebrate all of the shapes, all of the sizes, and all of the colors. It's been a long time dream of mine to have a bunny hutch, which is also the name of a book I read last year. It was a really good book. But I hear that bunnies are actually like sort of intense animals to keep, and they chew through stuff, and sometimes they get mad, which kind of makes sense.